Welcome back to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have Christian Elliot. He has been a coach since 2003, logging 15,000 hours of one-on-one coaching. His quest to heal led him to personally used over 3 dozen different alternative modalities, which is something I hope we can talk about after we get to his thoughts on vaccines. He's an author, a speaker, and educator. He's built a holistic brick and mortar fitness and wellness business. He says it's the greatest ever seen. Right there in your bio. That's
Well,
awesome. He's a
that may
certified
be
personal
hyperbole.
trainer and coach, nutrition coach. He has a BS in communications from Calvin College. He's also graduated Minister of Divinity, I think it is, MDiv, Fuller Theological Seminary, and he's a full-time coach since 2003. Folks, if you want to start your own podcast, it's a lot of work. I do tons of podcasts and I hate producing podcasts. So if you're actually really serious and you're not a tire kicker and you want to, put together 10, 12 episodes and you want most of that to be on content and guests, you got to go to getagripstudios.com. That's right, in Toronto, Canada, but really virtually, long before virtual was a thing, we were doing these things virtually. But for right now, Spenser and Michael talking to Christian Elliot. Christian, how you doing?
I am well, thank you.
Say hello to Spencer Miles.
How you doing,
Hello,
Christian?
Good
So,
to hear your
Meet
voice.
you.
yeah,
Yep.
so
Mm.
you wrote an interesting article called The 18 Reasons I Won't Be Getting a COVID Vaccine. And it came across to me through a couple different forwards, and everyone's like, you got to read this article. You're really into this. And I read it. We contacted you, and you came on the show. Before we get into the reasons, why, there's nothing in your bio about, studying medicine, virology, epidemiology, anything like that. Like, how dare you, write this kind of a thing?
Right. Yeah. No, I have no medical background. I am not a scientist. I'm not even a journalist. I just like to think of myself as someone who pays attention. I've been studying holistic health more or less full time since my health recovery in 2003. And I felt like there was a lot of information going on and it was fairly one sided. And it was actually a moment from Del Bigtree. He had spent 15 hours in Texas doing activist work the day before a show. He got 3 minutes of time. So like 11 something at night, he got to deliver his remarks. And hearing him say that, I'm like, gee whiz, this guy cannot carry the load for everyone. I have some things I know to say and a humble audience that actually wants to hear my thoughts on it. So I figured, you know what? The next day he was doing his show and he hit his fist on the table and said, be brave. Basically, be willing to go and stand in the fire and just speak your truth. Tell what has made sense to you and see where you can help. And that was enough to say, okay, I need to do something. I can at least go out there and put my thoughts out. And I had a few clients and friends interested in what I wanted to, and kind of my thoughts on it, because they know I geek out on studying that sort of thing. And so I just wrote it as much for them to have one place where I could put all the things I had learned, or some of them. And so I just put them there so I'd have a reference to send people to, and I didn't have to keep having the same conversations or writing the same email. It grew from there. It took on its own life. So that's the backstory. I just wrote it to make the contribution where I could.
And I know that Spencer wants to jump in here and has a few questions for you. So Spence, whenever you're ready, just throw your finger up like this at me, and I'll divert over to you. But
Mm.
why? Tell me this: why do we have to be brave to be skeptical? Like, that seems like, when did skeptics become a threat, a national threat in America and in Canada as well?
Yeah, I don't know if I can put a specific date on that, but I can say there's a massive amount of fear going on when you stand up to a particular industry or person of power. And it's part of human nature that we are tribal and we want to be liked and we want to be connected and to feel like we're not an outlier. And anytime that any of us, stand up and say something that ruffles some feathers or doesn't fit the quote unquote conventional thinking, what it can do is it can create emotional dissonance and this idea that I'd rather just be quiet than do something to distance myself from the people I've known or to create backlash against ideas that I may have. It's easier, it's quieter, it's more comforting to just step back and say, I think I'll just not say something. And whether it's fear of losing your job, whether it's fear of losing connection to your tribe, or it's just I don't have the emotional fortitude to have conversations that are difficult, especially when it's contentious like this. It's hard to have rational conversations about some topics because we're all we're looking for typically is information that reinforces the way we think. And to be able to go into a conversation level headed and non hysterical and just say, I'm going to do my best to really put myself in the other person's shoes and learn from them or hear what makes sense to them. It's not a natural, you have to, it's a learned behavior. It's not natural to go into conversations like that. And when you go into one expecting it's going to be uncomfortable or ugly, or they might think ill of me, or there's probably some nuance or angle I haven't considered, it's easier to just be quiet. And so I don't why we have such a contentious society. I think there's a lot of different reasons behind that. I think social media has driven a wedge where they constantly feed us more of the type of information we want, and so we become more and more siloed and more skeptical and tribal against each other. And so I think a lot of it's just fear is a short answer for that question.
I think one side is deranged. I actually, like what you just described to me is only a one-way street. So, like for example, and I have nothing against anyone that protests for any reason, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Canadian, so I don't know the situation of racial tensions in the United States. But I would love to have some people listen to how destroying and ripping everything down in my city affects me. Like, why don't you listen to us? That doesn't seem to even be considered as an option. And I'm not talking about the only people that I can see that state those claims and just flatly just state like, hey, you know what, destroying the local coffee shop is not a good idea. And are African Americans. The only people really truly standing up are people of color who are like, there's many of them out there, intellectuals, journalists, business leaders, and they're standing up against that and saying, "Hey, I'm allowed to," but the average American, non-African American, is completely terrified to say how they feel about having their city destroyed by thugs, actually. And I don't see anybody listening to that narrative. The listening always has to go the other way. And I don't understand that. Like, how did you get into a position where the conversation has to be completely under all the understanding, all the empathy, all the listening has to go in one direction, and the other people can just behave in a deranged manner and not have to explain themselves?
Yeah, well, you're asking important questions, or you're shaping a an understanding of parts of the story of where we've ended up societally, country by country or even globally, in terms of the tension that we feel against each other. And I think, none of us knows with 100% clarity everything that's going on. We can do our best. We can't know someone's intentions, but we can look at what they say and what they do, and we can make guesses about what they're trying to accomplish. And when you step back and you look at, yeah, I can speak for our country because I don't know the politics of a lot of countries very well, but in our country, in the U.S., we have two political parties that basically disagree on everything. It's like there's no middle. Like if they like it, then the other side has to not like it. And there's a human nature element of the desire for power, a desire for validation, and there's the beautiful side and the ugly side of human nature. Sometimes um, you put somebody in the right situation, and anybody, even of high character, can have a hard time maintaining their integrity. And there's a desire for humans to feel in control, and sometimes that desire for control goes into directions of unchecked avarice or greed. They just can't get enough. They always need a little bit more, or they get unchecked desire for power, that Machiavellian, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. And it's just an insatiable desire for more of it. And why I think that may be a relevant plot point in the bigger narrative that we're talking about is because those who want power have to go find some way to continue to get more and more of it. And the way that you get power is you pit people against each other, and you create tribalism, and you create this tension or these false dichotomies between people, these points of contention that otherwise would not be there. And if you can get one side fired up and telling them that you will meet their needs and that the other side is bad, and you have better marketing and a better understanding of human nature, you can win the day and you can have power. And so it is in the interests of the people who are puppeteering so much of the drama that we see to continue to perpetuate more things that create division. And the fun part about the work I get to do is I have to be good as a coach. I have to study two things at as much depth as I possibly can. One is human physiology. How does the body work? How does it heal? And I just go deep with that. What else can I learn about what scenarios it needs to heal? The other one, to be good as a coach, is to recognize that humans are not just physical beings. We are emotional beings. We are creatures with a nature, and human nature doesn't change either. So if I go deeper in human nature, the more and more you study that, the more you realize at the end of the day, we all want the same stuff. And the more they can get us focused on what's different about us instead of what's the same about us, the more they can continue to divide us. So if you boil it down at the end of the day, you and I want the same things. We want romance and adventure and significance and dignity and validation and on through the list of basic human drivers. And when you sit with somebody and you're able to say, yeah, but I want this too, you start to build common ground that wasn't
I
there
think you're
before.
wrong
And
about
so,
that.
okay, tell me why.
I think you're wrong because I think some people want revenge, chaos. I think that that's what they want. And not everybody wants revenge, chaos. Not everybody feels like they should coerce other people. And that's some people get into that trap, that avarice trap that you talked about, malice.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, whether, I always think it's a waste of time to try to figure out someone's intentions, because whether it's incompetence or malevolence, if the result is the same, who cares, right? If there's coercion afoot, and there's definitely, I was talking to my wife the other day and kind of segue into the vaccine article you wrote, which was the reason why we had you on, because I think we could do a whole podcast on human nature, you and I. So I don't think you're right about that. I don't think everybody actually at the base level wants the same things. I'm not sure that's true. I think there's probably a lot of people that do, but I would say that there are a lot of people that are just probably 20% of our population, which is purely sadistic and likes to see other people suffer. And that gives them a feeling of satisfaction or something. I've seen it. I know it's real. And I think that then there's other sets of the population, and then the rest of the people, maybe 60% is what you're describing, is that genuinely want good things in their life. But I was talking to my wife the other day, and a friend of mine, and the friend of mine told me that he's getting divorced over the vaccine because he doesn't want to take the vaccine. He doesn't care if his wife takes the vaccine, but his wife wants to give their children the vaccine. And when I asked him, I said, why does she want to do this? And the reason why is because she wants to travel and she wants to fit in. So the reason why she's putting a foreign substance in her body is reasons of not wanting public humiliation or not wanting to be outside the group you mentioned. Okay. And because the state in Canada is threatening to issue vaccine passports, which would stop her ability to travel. So it has nothing to do with fear of COVID-19. There's absolutely zero actual fear of the virus going on within this couple. It's simply one person doesn't want to be coerced and the other does. And I think this segues well into your reasons and logical, rational arguments that you can present to people about why maybe you want to wait. Like, not to be an anti-vaxxer. And Dell, I love Dell, Big Tree. I think he's great. Mm-hmm. There's a touch of anti-vax, not a touch. He's pure anti-vax, which is okay. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not in that field, but I am concerned about this. And so your first one that you threw up there, we can just start reading them off, Spenser, here. Do you have it in front of you, Spenser?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up, yeah.
Yeah. Vaccine makers are immune from liability. How many people do you think know that, Christian?
Not enough, I would imagine. It's usually when there's a reason I started with that as the first point, because most people just don't know that. And when you understand the history behind how that law came to be, or how it has been unrolled since it was passed, it gives you it turns your stomach to know what's going on behind closed doors and how they have basically taken away what I believe in the Americas, the Seventh Amendment, the right to a trial. For if you've had a grievance done against you, sorry, in this situation, you don't have that option anymore. And knowing that, it goes into the second point, that the companies that are making this have a nefarious history. They have plenty of instances where they have been sued for the tunes of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars for making products that they knew ahead of time were going to cause injuries and deaths. And when you give a company that has that history immunity from liability and expect them to act differently, you have to wrestle with a lot of cognitive dissonance in your head and just somehow believe that this product must have been made by angels and there's nothing that could go wrong with it. And now, because broken humans that do imperfect science, that's all we've ever done since the beginning of science, have now figured it out. Every variable's been accounted for. This is going to be perfect. And to know they don't have liability, the Supreme Court of the United States declared vaccines unavoidably unsafe because they know there are risks to all of them. And when you take away the opportunity for someone to exercise their constitutional right to a trial by jury, to weigh the evidence, and you can't even get the evidence because they don't have to give it to you. The only reason we know that these companies have done nefarious things and more or less lied about it, took it to market anyway, is because they can be sued for all of their other products that are not vaccines. So that, to me, the immunity from liability is a great place to start a discussion because it says, hold on, pump the brakes. Why would we trust them? And if you can honestly answer that and look at the history of it, it's hard to just go with blind faith that there might be or that there might not be some problem with it.
See, and I've taken the stance that they're not evil. They didn't make these knowing there was going to be side effects, knowing there was going to be deaths. I believe their level of acceptance of side effects and deaths became higher when the immunity was put in place. That when you're making the product, you can go, well, instead of having 10 people, we can have 10,000, and that's an acceptable number now because we know we're not going to be sued.
Well, and the other piece to this that I didn't mention in the article, but that's relevant, is that vaccines, strangely enough, are classified in the U.S. as biologics, which is the same category as supplements. So they don't have to go through the same rigorous safety testing that all other pharmaceutical medications have to go through. You can pull up vaccine inserts when the doctor's ready to give it to your child and look at it, and it'll say, this was safety tested for 4 days. This one was safety tested for 5 days. It's on the inserts in the packages. And basically what that means is they put it in a bunch of people, nobody died, 5 days later, we're good, ship it. That was the safety testing they did for that. So again, I know the vaccine topic fairly well and can go into more if you want, but there's something different about this product that should have extra scrutiny, I think, not less, because we're trying to give it to every person on the planet and do it in the most rushed fashion in history. And what could possibly go wrong?
Whoa, who knows, right?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah. So the checkered past of vaccine companies, yeah, you're talking about, Johnson & Johnson's on like a 3-year rotation of massive settlements. Every 3 years, something goes wrong with Johnson & Johnson. Let's roll into, if you're ready, Spenser, the ugly history of attempts to make coronavirus vaccines, which I think a lot of people, they think that, we can make a vaccine for everything. They just haven't tried. Well, cold sores and genital herpes there's no vaccination for that. And that's full-blown epidemic. I think 40% of the U.S. adult population has that virus. You're talking about the common cold. Flus are very tricky. Talk to us a little bit about coronaviruses and why you think that the history is ugly.
Well, it's the part of the reason there's incentive to make a coronavirus vaccine is because they're so darn contagious. The flip side is they're just not very deadly. It's basically the common cold. And so if you can, however, find a vaccine that could stop transmission, that's the type of viral load on the planet that goes around and can infect the most people the quickest. And so the market for that would be gigantic if you can make one. So they have been trying for decades to do this on ferrets and civets and mice and even primates, attempting to make vaccines to coronaviruses that would reach the endpoint they're going for. And unfortunately, they've never been successful doing it. You could go back to March or so of last year, and you can watch Peter Hotez and Paul Offit talk about all of the problems they've had attempting to make coronavirus vaccines, stating this problem of paradoxical immune enhancement, where the body creates a cytokine storm and goes in and just destroys itself. They're on record saying this, like, we've never been successful doing it, so how in the world are we going to do it now? Peter Hotez said the fastest I could possibly imagine this happening would be a minimum of 18 months. Sure enough, 6, 7, 8 months later, we've got them. And of course, they're perfectly safe because we have to believe that way. In fairness, Peter Hotez and Paul Offit have both flipped their positions on
That was so weird. I saw
Yes,
that
it was.
video where he's just basically saying you can't do it, and then later he's like, "Well, I've changed my position." He like basically comes out and totally says the opposite thing, and without any proof, just states it, like states that
Right.
he's changed his position. Not that I've done the research or here's my new study or whatever. He just changes his position. It's so odd.
It is. I can't explain what was behind that because I don't know, but it does seem it is a data point that raises questions.
And on the, it's interesting. There was a in the early. I don't know if you read these articles or you saw these at all when it came out. I know Spencer and I talked about it. One of the things that was interesting was that smokers who were in the category of high risk for COVID were significantly less likely to be hospitalized or die from COVID-19. And so this in April 2020 or whatever triggered massive kind of like, is it nicotine? Does nicotine attack the? And then you had nurses taking chewing nicotine gum and having nicotine lozenges, wearing the patch because this was legit. Like smokers, what the hell? How could a respiratory illness not affect smokers worse? And then very quietly, on the side, I saw another article which talked about that smokers are much less likely to listen to their doctors. Right? So, which means the correlation between it is they don't take flu vaccines, which I found was super interesting. So people that should be more susceptible to a respiratory illness are less susceptible to a respiratory illness because they don't get vaccinated every year with the flu vaccine. This was just a postulation. It's not proven. I'm not saying that's a fact. There's no, but that was speculated by a virologist or an epidemiologist article that I read that it has something to do with flu vaccines causing these elderly people who take them every year to get even sicker from COVID than they normally would due to all this different things. So, the unexplained, the unresearched, they don't know what's going to happen, yet people are rushing forward full bore as if, it's perfect. It's very awkward situation as someone I believe has a rational mind, Spencer and Christian, to look at and say, come on, really? It's like, come on, you can't be saying that. Talk to us about number 4, the data gaps submitted to the FDA by the vaccine makers.
Yeah, that one is for people who do data and analysis for their job. I've had a few of them reach out to me since that article went out, and they just express their own feelings of being flabbergasted as to why we cannot look at that data. Even some of the articles pushing back against what I wrote have been like, yeah, I have to admit, it would seem more transparent, and it would probably cut down on some of this quote unquote anti-vaccine rhetoric if they would at least give us the data that shows us how they determined 90 to 95% efficacy. The reality is they plucked less than 200 people out of the tens of thousands they were studying and used that to create the efficacy claims. What happened to the rest of the people? I'd love to know that. How did you determine who and when and all of the little details that someone else could analyze up and down any different way? We just don't get to see that, and we'll probably hide that behind some sort of intellectual property. And the irony of it is, before these were released, they did this dog and pony show of signing documents saying how transparent they were going to make this process so everyone could look in on it. And sure enough, that was never the intent, because they won't release the data. And it would be sure nice to look at it, especially with good minds that know exactly what's going on. But Peter Doshi even pointed out some of the data that we do have. You look at it and it looks like it's barely any more effective than the placebo group based on the numbers we can look at. So Why that is locked away in some lab or ivory tower, I don't know, but I would love it if they would release that. And the only thing we can guess is the reason they won't release it is because it would completely ruin the claims they're making.
So uh, something was just in my head there about the claims and that, but I kind of lost my train of thought there. Let me see if I can catch it again. It was super important. I had it. I lost it. Okay, so the data gaps. When you're looking at this, right? I would like to see the racial and ethnic makeup of the test subjects to see how many First Nations people were in their trials and how many African Americans and Southeast Asians and Asians and all the different people around the world, because you have a movement in the United States to say that, medical devices are racist. This is a real thing. Okay, so for example, whatever they put on your finger when you go to the hospital to check your blood pressure or whatever that thing does, that device is a racist device because it's 4% less effective on African Americans because of the melatonin in their skin. And so if you're on borderline to be admitted to the hospital or not based on hypertension, it's more often that an African American will not be admitted to the hospital when they should be admitted because the device is calibrated on Caucasian people, okay? When it was made in the 70s and 80s. I would love to see their data to know if First Nations people were part of their data and their placebo group and their non-placebo group, and because there's interesting reports coming out of places in northern Canada where they're having 1 in 225 serious life-changing adverse reactions to the vaccine, much higher. And those areas are very highly populated by First Nations people. And I would love to see that, what happens in a year or 2 years in the climate of the United States right now, if it comes out that vaccine adverse events are 3 times more likely amongst African Americans and First Nations people than it is of Caucasians. What then? How do they deal with that?
They, as in the people making the vaccines?
Yeah, or I mean, anybody, the whole, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way it will be, I'm predicting here, whether or not this happens or not. My guess is that it will just continue to be spun. If the problem is all the people who didn't get it, that's what's the problem. And had we gotten more of such and such people to do it, I'd love to see a breakdown by ethnicity. I'd also love to see a gender breakdown and an age breakdown.
Sure.
From what I understand, the people that were in the clinical trials were like the Avengers, the healthiest people they could possibly find. Can't have sex. There's so many different things. They can't be on medications. Just the pillar of health, the best people we could find in the country to start going through this trial. And then, perfect, it's done, ship it. Like, everyone can take it. We have no idea the subpopulations, the different health conditions, and how it might affect one gender to the next, because we can't look at their data. And there are answers waiting for us in there. And unfortunately, now we just have to wrap in, I'm going to guess, the half of the population that's willing to get this as part of the experiment. And then we can compare that to the rest of us who don't. And we can have some controls there to figure out eventually, depending on how forthcoming the CDC and others are with the data, of what is actually happening. But I'm not holding my breath that there's a level of transparency that will give us some of those answers. So you could be right, and maybe there will be data and there could be some more backlash. But I think, back to our earlier conversation, the more we can learn how to frame these discussions from what we do have in common rather than just labeling, because it's such an unhelpful thing. As soon as someone's labeled an anti-vaxxer or pick your anti-whatever, it's like, okay, good, I don't have to think anymore. Like, they're just anti, and so I can put them in the stupid box as a non-critical thinker, and I can go back to my tribe and just learn. And unfortunately, I imagine some of that will be what happens if what you're talking about comes up, and we'll just be at each other's throats in different ways. So, but who knows?
You talk about the foxes guarding the hen house here, and so I don't think we've covered 4 and 5 in a sense, but I don't think a lot of people realize that the people that are not sharing the data are the ones benefiting from it not being shared. Is that what you're suggesting in your article?
that is part of it. Yes, the bigger beef or hopefully point I was making is that where has the FDA been in the transparency of this process? If you've ever watched what happens when a vaccine goes up for a vote to be approved to be added to the schedule, it will shock you. It's like, no joke, it's like watching a Saturday Night Live skit. You're like, this cannot be what happens when they approve a vaccine. Come on. There's no more robust debate. Nobody is questioning or asking the tough questions about, I don't know, where's the data? Like, that doesn't happen. And you get these ACIP meetings where they just recently took Johnson & Johnson off the market, and then a 10-4 vote, they put it back on because of course it's safe. And we're going to, in their mind, that they justify, but we're going to save more lives than we'll kill with this vaccine. And so who knows where all that goes?
What healthy person in their right mind would take that? Like, I'm honestly serious with you. You know, like it's
back to my original.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'd say it's more back to my original comments about, like, I'm working on a couple more articles because I've gotten so many good questions since I wrote that. And one of the big ones is like, how in the world do we get through to people? Like, what can I send somebody to wake them up? And it's not and it's hard to answer that because I don't know this person or what information they find valid. But I think the more we go upstream into the basics of human nature and common decency and non-hysterical lines of questions and just say, does this make sense to you? And to be able to have a conversation, it's hard to foster. I'm pleased to say, most of the feedback I've gotten has actually been positive. It's been people being gracious, and I've definitely gotten some trolls, but the number of people several people have given good, legitimate, kind pushback. And I welcome that because it sharpens my thinking. But some of it's on us who want to do our best to make our points. It's on us to do it in a way that's not combative, but that does sound like it welcomes conversation. And the more we can do that, the more they can realize, okay, he's not crazy. He's not an anti-fill in the blank. He's just trying to make sense of it. And there are definitely some things that smell really funny. And if you're just willing to sweep that under the rug and not talk about it, that's where we're going to continue to have tension. So the more it comes into the light and the more we can sit with someone's hard questions, let them have their emotional moment, eventually those waves of emotion pass and you've got it all out, because every human needs to feel heard and validated. And once that's happened, and once the emotional wave has passed, and I feel like I've said everything I want to say, then I'm inclined to hear what you have to say. And we never fostered a society of critical thinking and empathy and listening and logic and debate. We fostered a contentious soundbite society. And so to me, it's upstream addressing some of those questions and helping with, as much as possible, reshape what it means to have a discussion before we get in the weeds of the reality, which science says what, and who should we trust. It's let's find a better way to talk to each other.
Let me ask you this: you have the people who obviously came against you. They have a different mindset of what you wrote. What is their most critical reason against what you wrote? Because when I try to tell people the same type of things, maybe not all 18, that's a very good job, but is they only come back to me and say, you just don't care about other people. I'm like, no, that's not the case. But that's the only resistance I hear is I don't care about grandma. And it blows my mind that there's really no other angle that they come at me. Or I don't have empathy. They'll tell me that all the time.
Yeah, and so reshaping that discussion, I might ask a question like, what did I say that gave you the impression that I don't care about other people? Help me understand where you're coming from on that. And to do it in a way that, like, nobody that, to my knowledge, has ever been offended by a genuine question that just is spoken kindly. Like, no, I really, you think that? Okay, I'd love to know why you think that way. And is it okay if I step outside your box as an anti-vaxxer for a second? Because then I can jettison, like, if you can't call me anti-science and anti-vaxxer or a conspiracy theory, I've just removed your three best arguments or your three best labels you want to put on me, and now we can talk. I personally don't have a problem with the idea of a COVID vaccine, but so far it seems like good idea, really bad product, or really shady process to make one. And if we can come to,
and then to add to that, and like, I don't think someone who's in the group of people that COVID-19 is very deadly for is irrational to take the vaccine.
No.
Not at all. I think I don't think I think that's a rational, logical choice. So if you're of a certain age, maybe you have some health conditions, you're struggling with your weight, you have diabetes, hypertension, whatever, right? Maybe it does make sense for you. That's not what anyone's saying. What we're saying is this mass coercion based on public humiliation, shame, guilt, and threats to mobility is something that, think people should be thinking twice about.
Exactly.
And I don't see how you're not kind, beautifully explaining your reasons. Like, how is that not caring about people? You took the time to research this wonderful article, lay it all out beautifully for people, backed up by proof. That seems like a really nice thing to do for people. If you want to read it, you can read it. If you don't, you don't. It's simple.
Right. Well, I guess to respond to that, part of why people just, as soon as they read the title, they're on the defensive and they're going to go and look for why I'm wrong. And they're going to that we have to figure out what he said, because it's not that I haven't made a few good points and that I might be onto something. What it implies is that there's no person on the planet right now which gets to skip. Well, maybe that's strong. Very few of us are going to have the option to not have an opinion on this and to not have a decision point, because it is a personal decision. And none of us want to feel like we're going to make the wrong one, and a year or two or 10 down the road, we're going to be like, crap, I was on the wrong side of that. And now I'm questioning my own judgment, and I'm questioning my own ability to think critically. And it's, to some level, a deeper issue. It's questioning my identity. And nobody wants to question that. We want to believe. Dale Carnegie pointed out brilliantly in How to Win Friends and Influence People. No one on the planet thinks they're wrong. Everyone, its default setting is always that I'm right. And well, if you do the math on that, that doesn't work. It's not going to happen that we're all right. And so I'd rather look for every reason why someone else is wrong than turn the mirror back on myself and be like, okay, did I miss something here? And the more that we can empathetically frame the discussion, this is not about, I'm not questioning your love of other people or your parenting or your intellect. I'm just trying to ask some questions here. And I take it that you are a competent, rational ability, have the ability to think critically about anything. So let's start with us as peers on the same side of the table, and let's have a level-headed conversation about what we're looking at. Let's stop calling each other names, and let's just say, at the end of the day, we both want to be healthy. Like, that's not what we're debating here. What we're debating is whether or not the way we're choosing to go about it, or we're being force-fed it by those with power right now, are looking out for our best interest, or might there be something else going on?
No long-term safety testing, I think, speaks for itself. Okay.
Right.
Just if you have trouble with that one, I don't think we can help you. Okay, but let's roll into inform.
They're not going to be done till 2020, into 2022, or in 2023 is when the clinical trials are scheduled to be over. How in the world would we have that data yet?
No informed consent. Let's talk about what informed consent means, and then maybe roll into why there's almost. It's almost like there's a cabal of people that want to prevent an informed consent movement with respect to these vaccines. They're almost, you have news media anchors coming out and guilt tripping people. You got, you have all manner of, the people coming forward and, looking askew at you, why has the even people that use the argument my body my choice for abortion have completely abandoned it for a vaccine? Like that was such it's my body, it's my choice if I want to have an abortion. Okay, now it's not your body. Your body belongs to the populace, and you have to put something in it even if you don't want to. So how do we how did this just get vaporized in the matter of a year?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess to back up to where you started, the idea of informed consent came from the Nuremberg trials after Nazi Germany fell. The idea that you can't just force people against their will to do something. You have to give them information that helps them make a decision, and it is their choice, and that should never be taken away from us. So the idea that it's my body, my choice, but except for this one where it's my body, the government's choice, it doesn't hold water when you think about the Nuremberg Code. But it more specifically to the idea of informed consent, I like that they're attempting to, like, here's an insert, here's a thing. But if somebody verbally sits down with me and says, okay, here's the deal. We have not tested this on anybody but the healthiest people on the planet. We're like dabbling in other conditions now and experimenting on kids with it, but we haven't tested it on anybody but the healthiest people we can find from 18 to 55, and we don't know if it stops transmission, and we don't have any evidence that it stops infection, and there are risks to this product that are, and here they are. I think we'd have fewer people stay at the drive-thru and just keep going. That would be thinking twice or thinking harder about it. But the idea of informed consent right now is fairly, I hate to say it, it's fairly laughable. We just tell people, yeah, you might get a sore arm, you might have some, a headache, or you might crack a tooth, or like, and then we make it seem so minimal and highly unlikely when we don't have any data to say that it is unlikely. There's no long-term safety testing on this. It is really, really easy to figure out how we don't even need VAERS or any sort of complicated system.
And VAERS is, just for the listeners, is the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System in the United States.
Which I covered in another point. But
yeah, so we're going to get right into it in a second.
Okay.
I think they dovetail.
Yep. Yeah, they do. But here's how you figure out what the death rates are from this. So we have informed consent. You look at the X-ray tables and you say, how many people die every day in this age range? And you just do it for all of them. We have 20 years of data that say X number of people die every single day. Because when there's a vaccine injury, it doesn't leave breadcrumbs to say, oh, this was the vaccine. You can't definitively say this vaccine caused that injury, or this person, Hank Aaron recently, to die a few days, 14, 17 days later after he got the vaccine. All you can say is, yep, he's dead. And we don't know what caused it. Most of the people don't get an autopsy.
Yeah, Prince Philip died after the second. Prince Philip died after the second dose. A gust of wind could have killed that guy.
Right.
That's how it's explained. It's all explained away. It's
because it's all anecdotal. It's so small. Here's how you know. You find out the number of people who die every day, 20 years of data, and then you compare that to the number of people who die after they get the shot, any of them. And you just lay them next to each other. Here's the people who don't get the shot. Here's their death rate. Stays the same. It's been there for 20 years. Here's the number of people who are dying after this. That doesn't prove it, but if you get 20 people die when it's normally 2, or whatever the numbers are, you have some place to begin an investigation to say, maybe we're actually killing more people than we thought with this. Maybe this does have an increased risk of death. And nobody's doing that study. No, it's not done anywhere, probably because it would look really ugly. So if they had that level of informed consent,
I guarantee you they've done that study.
I was going to say, I think they're doing it. It's not public, right?
I think they know. I think that's why they pulled the Johnson & Johnson. Norway did it, and why they pulled the AstraZeneca vaccine. Okay? Like, I love the way Canada, no, the AstraZeneca vaccine is safe, except in Norway. Well, the Norwegians aren't as tough as us, Canadians. Wimps. Those wimps in Norway, their health agencies filled with right-wing cranks. I think Trump works there. This kind of stuff. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, Norway's a country, anyway. But what I wanted to say is, like, a lot of people don't understand what a vaccine adverse event is. Okay? So, for example, you should not get sick after getting a vaccine. Like, a lot of people don't know that. You're not supposed to get sick.
Yeah. They celebrate it now. They tell you that's how you know it's working.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I told you were going to get it.
Like, if you're sick, if you get a vaccine and you're shivering and you're sick and you have a fever and then chills, that is a vaccine adverse event. That's what it is. A low grade one, sure. But this is like, people joke about it. It's like every single person that has taken the vaccine, except for the Pfizer one. I know a few people that took the Pfizer vaccine. This is all anecdotal, folks, but every single person has had an adverse event. And they all laughed it off like, yeah, they told me it was going to happen. And that is an adverse event. You're not supposed to have like a little bit of a sore arm because of the needle or whatever. That's not an adverse event. But fever, chills, headache, sick for 3 days, you've had a vaccine adverse event. You should report it to VAERS.
That's right. Or major seizures or menstrual. I think I have 6
Oh, the menstrual thing is so weird.
That's crazy.
Oh my gosh. And the ladies, like anecdotal stuff, but women whose babies died after they got, they were nursing.
Oh, God.
And their babies died after they got the vaccine. Like, all anecdotal, but give us the data so we can look at it and make real judgments, but they won't do it. Nothing is eroding trust in this product more than that, as far as I can tell.
The transmission, okay? So you read a New York Times article headline, Spenser, unvaccinated visitor to a old folks home where everyone is vaccinated, transmit virus to the vaccinated. What? Like that's a headline? Headline like that? Like what? How did we get here? Where like that's like straight out of 1984 doublespeak.
You know what? That's probably the second most argument I have with people is once they get the poke, they think they no longer transmit it, and I keep saying it's still in your body. The poke is just to make it so you have less. At least if you believe what they're telling us, you have less effects. But yet everybody has this mindset that as soon as I get that, I'm fine. I'm not transmitting. I can do whatever I want. And then you have the CDC earlier this week put out that yellow, green, red face chart. And if you looked at the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated side, I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Because if you're unvaccinated, you're all yellow. There's no green unless you're outside by yourself in the middle of an island. I don't understand where the mindset came from that as soon as they poke me, I can no longer transmit it. Where did that come from? And I argue with them all the time. I go, okay, well, if you have it, I don't. Nothing changed. You're just going to if you do get it, you will have less side effects. Where did this come from?
That's the narrative that has been our understanding or expectation of vaccines in general, that you can't actually, now that I've got it, these angel-made products are perfect and I will not have any ability to ship. Measles went around Washington State in people who were vaccinated. This is not a new phenomenon. There's the documents submitted to the FDA by the maker say we don't have evidence that this stops transmission. That is a data gap that we have. It's in their own paper they submitted. So I think that's just the fundamental belief that this is, of course, what it is. And then you're kind of shocked to find out, like, crap, I can't take my mask off, even though, like, Biden's going around. He's got a Zoom press conference. He's the only one in the room. He's on Zoom and he's got a mask on and he's vaccinated. Does that do anything to build confidence in this product that it's doing what we were expecting it to do? You can watch a video montage I can show it to you, several different public health officials, including Tony Fauci and Paul Offit, saying, what we're likely here to get is just a product that lowers symptoms. It's not designed to stop transmission. That's not what they were studying, but that's what we are told. And the New York and Michigan public health departments put up social media posts making false claims about the effectiveness of the vaccine, and both of them had to retract them when they were challenged legally because they were false. That we don't know that the vaccine does that yet.
So you brought up Washington. It's funny. I live in Seattle, and so we have road signs, everywhere, digital road signs. As soon as the vaccine became not widely available, but pretty available to the elderly, our road signs changed. And all of them now for the last 6 weeks have said, vaccinated, still mask up. And it blows my mind because I go, that's the worst sales pitch I've ever seen in my life. You have everybody running around these roads going, well, guess I don't need to get vaccinated because I still got to wear my mask. To me, you got to change the narrative to get more. If your goal is to get more people to do it, why are we having people on Zoom still wear masks when they're vaccinated? It's the worst marketing I've ever seen.
No, it comes back to that, I would say, just kind of stubborn belief that I can't believe that I was duped. That can't be that somebody's been playing me and they got me to take this. Like, no way. Okay, they just learned something else about it. And I'm just like, you almost have to consciously choose to either bury your head in the sand or not look at any contradictory evidence and just go like, tell me what's next, Fauci. Like, I'm ready. And that's just how so many people tend to operate.
People are catching COVID after being fully vaccinated. Okay, so it doesn't stop transmission. It doesn't stop you from getting it. It reduces your symptoms, except if you're a nun in Kentucky and then you die.
Yeah, good point. So we're assuming that it lowers your symptoms. We can't actually look at the data they use to create that efficacy claim, but let's assume it is. So you're referencing there's a group of nuns who have been isolated the entire time COVID's gone on, and then somebody comes in and vaccinates. I think 35 of them, and everybody. I think it was sure the numbers are escaping. You probably have it in front of you there, but the number of it's like 27, 28 people catch COVID after they got vaccinated. Two of them died right away, and another one died shortly after that. So if we're looking for a sales pitch, like perfect control group, we had a like population older. This should be proving its worth right there. Same thing happened in Gibraltar. They had an isolated population. They started
Gibraltar's
vaccinating
another
people,
one, yeah.
and they go through the roof in their case and death count. Like they were fine before this intervention showed up. You're not going to hear that on mainstream media because it doesn't fit the narrative. But those are plot points. Again, it's more data, and a responsible public health department would be sounding the alarm and saying, we need to figure out what's going on here, rather than let's take it off the market, do a little dog and pony show, let's put it back on. Like, I'm sure we're sure it's safe. Like I don't know if they understand how badly they're eroding confidence in these products or in vaccines in general by what they're doing. But they're slitting their own throats here. So
the healthcare worker rejection of the product is the most telling to me.
And nursing homes. I think I didn't put it in there, but it's like 62% of nursing home workers are like, I don't want that thing either.
Yeah. Wow. Like people who have seen it the closest, like I remember that one video that was super scary that came out where they vaccinated the guy in the parking lot and all of a sudden he starts freaking out in the car. Like that is so scary, dude. He's like I don't know if he's 40 or 45. Like he's a young guy. It's not like some, he doesn't look overweight or anything. He just gets vaccinated, pulls over, and then all of a sudden he's having a seizure in his car beside it. It's like, and you're like, oh, I just got that too? What the hell is that? I mean, that's so scary, dude. And like, right. I already had COVID. I had COVID, you know what I mean? It's like, I already had it. Like, what happens to me? Is there like a special one for people have they studied anybody that's already had the disease? And no. I don't know if that's one of the later points. I can't remember, but
it is. Yeah.
Sorry, folks. I'm sneak peek, but
we don't have to go sequentially here.
The overall death rate, but it's just easier so we get to them all. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I might forget one. The overall death rate from COVID is ridiculously low, actually, especially if you're not obese.
Yes, and that, unfortunately, I mean, people are contentious with that one because it can't be, and you're manipulating the numbers, and you don't understand. And like, all I did was pull the numbers from the CDC's own website. This is their set of numbers. And if I need to understand it differently, please help me. But when it's 99.74% survival rate, in other words, 0.26% of people are likely to die from this. And perhaps there's newer numbers since that one that I found. But if that's the death rate, what's the threshold for locking down the world now? Like, every time a cold comes around?
Yeah.
Because people die about that much every year. And supposedly there's no more flu in Washington, which is interesting. Now it's just called a COVID death. So we can keep the numbers going and make it seem like it's a big deal. But if we keep bloating this and pretending that the death rate is some mass casualty thing, and they keep like the ticker on the news every day.
They could just invert those numbers. They can invert those numbers. So, like, you could say, like, there's 14.79 million people in Ontario, 14.57. You could say 14,569,948 people don't have COVID-19.
Yeah, that's not a good headline. If it bleeds, you guys probably saw the Project Veritas undercover getting that CNN guy to talk about how gangbusters the ratings are when they talk about the death rates, and they keep the ticker up. And I wish the number would be higher because we could get better ratings. It's based on fear, and it's Bill Maher called it fear porn.
Yeah,
they're
Bill Maher.
Out, and I would love it. That was great when he took on, like, how did the Democratic Party become the party that believes so much wrong crap about the vaccine and about COVID in general? Like, that he's pointing the finger back at his own party and saying, what is going on?
He even says we. He uses the word we in that monologue.
Yeah.
Over and over. How did we get here? We're supposed to be the party of truth. They're supposed to be the liars. We got rid of the orange orangutan and all that sort of stuff because we wanted to get rid of the lies. And here we are believing lies. It's an incredible monologue if you haven't seen it. It's just so good. Yep. So you got to the bloated numbers. We're getting into the bloated numbers here. Ontario has literally put out their COVID-19, how they do the statistics, okay? And in the numbers, it turns out that all infections and deaths are increased by 50%. So and then the reason is because a New York Times article in April 2020 said that Italy had underestimated the infections and deaths by 50%. And that was our reasoning. And they have it right in their own document. I can give it to Scott, the producer, and he can show it to everybody on the screen right now. 50% was the number used. And why 50%? And so what have you, that's just so deceitful to me.
It's shockingly deceitful.
Yeah.
But it's that one of the things that came out during the Nuremberg trials, the people on trial were asked, how did you dupe the entire German population? What did you do to get control over what at the time was about the most well-educated society on the planet? And the answer was simple. We just made them afraid. And so if you want to get control of people, you make them afraid. If you want to make people afraid, you make them scared for their life. And bloated death numbers is a great way to make people afraid so you can control them. As soon as they lose their ability to create fear, all of us are we get to be rational.
I think that's wrong.
Tell me why.
I think that's wrong. I don't think they made them afraid. I think that they created a scapegoat and gave a name to their pain. I don't think the German people needed to be afraid of anything. Their society was totally destroyed. The Weimar Republic was a basket case. Nobody wanted to live there. It was disgusting. It was overwrought. It was riddled with the worst inflation in human history. The Weimar Republic was a horrible place to live. And so Hitler comes along and he says, that's our problem right over there. And I think the same thing's happening right now with people who don't want to get vaccinated. So that you've referenced, I don't want to say it again because we got kicked off YouTube for using the CAH acronym, okay? But, it's the same thing. When you're I could get into this as a whole podcast. So we've fallen victim to a bunch of biases here as a society. It goes conviction bias, leads to confirmation bias. If the leaders are convicted and confirmed, they get rid of anybody that disagrees, and then they create the group bias, which leads to a cascade effect. Everything has to be about COVID. Nothing can be about everything is about COVID. Leads to the sunk cost effect into the status quo bias, Christian. So right now we're in the sunk cost effect, right? And when you're in these traps, how the hell do they get out of this? Think about it. They're in a trap, right? Just like they were in Weimar. We need a scapegoat. We need to rally around a scapegoat. And when we find out who those people are, we attack them, we finish them off, or we put them in jail, or we silence them, and then it's done. We're back. Take your masks off. Whatever. They need a path out. And so I don't think it's because they made them afraid. I don't think German people were afraid in the 1930s. Their economy was booming. They had all manner of world records at the Olympics. They hosted the Olympics. That country was feeling pretty good about itself in the 1930s. I think what happened was they lied to them, gave them a scapegoat, and then they ended up killing a whole bunch of people and like mad murderers. I think you're wrong about that. I don't think that's correct. But what I would say is this. I think what's interesting is that 1920s Germany and what's happening in that has a lot of similarities to the way that they behaved towards looking for that scapegoat, that group of people that they can blame all the problems on and rally everybody that group bias against to attack. And I think that's the similarity, Christian. Sorry for being so... No, that's what I do. That's what I do.
I think you did a good job. And I wouldn't say that I have a strong disagreement with you. I would say it's just another tool in the toolkit. We know from fMRIs that fear shuts down rational thinking. Mm-hmm. And if you can make somebody afraid, then they're not going to behave rationally, and they're going to wait for a leader to show up, somebody with confidence and clarity and certainty, even if they're lying to you. You're going to look for somebody that will tell you what the answer is so you can feel anchored again. So you don't feel like you're just blown by the whims of all the fear running through you. So I wouldn't say that it's maybe exclusively fear, but I certainly think it's an effective tool that they have.
We were booked for an hour. You guys want to do another 20 minutes, half an hour?
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, get through it. Okay, good, because I'm rocking and rolling here. Okay, so 13.
You got to get to 13.
Okay, 13, brother. Okay. 13. That's so Fauci. I know that there was yes, I was aware the Bayh-Dole Act. You've referenced it, but I was aware of that before. But so Fauci received patents personally on mRNA vaccines?
He is one of 6. There's 6 people at NIAID that have claims on the patents. They can make $150,000 a year for the product being used in the market. So that it used to be a lot bigger than that. There's a bigger history behind this, and I probably could have done a better job in the article on laying out some of this history. But the short version, yes, Fauci can create the. He is basically an incubator for pharma. So the quick history on this is, see, he's been there since 1984, and his job, you would think, is to do whatever it takes to lower allergies and infections and autoimmune diseases and figure out where these problems are coming from and turn the ship around or make a dent in it at least. And what's happened is we've more than quadrupled all of the things that we've been trying to fight on his watch, from 12% of kids having a chronic health condition to 54% now in the US. That's not a record to brag about. But what Fauci's done is he's the only thing he can brag about when it comes to his record, and you can hear Robert Kennedy talk about this extensively, is the number of drugs he's taken to market. He gets $6.1 billion a year from the taxpayer and $1.6 billion from the Department of Defense for bioweapons research, which is basically vaccine research. And then he farms that out to universities around the country or world and gets them to discover ways to combat any health condition medically. So it's the only solution we have to any problem is just to create another drug. And because of the Bayh-Dole Act, there are patents that he gets to be part of. He can assign them to the US. But if you understand the history of how he's done that, or why they had to limit the money to $150,000 instead of what it was, it starts to look shady. So he is responsible for basically all the patents. And if you want to get deep in the weeds with that, you can look at the work of David Martin, who is, as far as I can tell, impeccable and above reproach and has access to all of the patents and can tell you all the history of what's going on there.
So have those patents been licensed to Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson and the like? And there's a licensing
They're the ones
arrangement?
they're using the patents. My understanding, and somebody that studies this at more depth can probably help me with the nuances of it. But my understanding is that he owns the patents, and then the companies that use it get to own a portion of it. And the people that were part of dreaming up the new technology that went into the whatever the pharmaceutical or vaccine is, they get to retain some of that patent and royalties for the product. So to say there's no conflict of interest, having gigantic amount of money go from the federal government to Moderna on his watch is a stretch. And to think that he's doing it above board, and he's been rocking the house trying to find solutions to all the problems. If he doesn't study what if we took one of the years you've been there, Fauci, and we spent $6.1 billion studying, I don't know, supplements, vitamins, or pesticides or pollution or any number of things that are creating the allergy infection. What if we went and attacked the actual problems? How much money has he wasted only looking for silver bullet medical solutions and having his hands in all the patents that go back?
So you're saying it's a racket?
It sure sounds like it. And
to sum it up, it sounds like a racket. It sounds like a racket.
Yeah, there's a reason he's lasted as long as he has. Other people who have pushed back against pharma and, this is unethical, have lost their jobs. They get silenced. They get thrown in jail. They get all sorts of problems. But he doesn't do that. He just shows up and creates word salads. Nowhere else in medicine do we listen to one person. You go get a second opinion. You have a panel of doctors. You do peer reviews. But the American public is force-fed a diet of the Fauci pontification and wordsmithing and watching attempt to put lipstick on the pig that he has created.
Why did America accept him so much? Why did Americans just, was it because he's older and short? Like, what is the reason that everyone went, I like that guy.
He's good
I'm
with
gonna listen
words.
to him. Right.
No, I would. Oh gosh, I would love to like him.
Cute.
It would be great if I believed that he was actually looking out for us. But the guy, that's not what he does. He is really good at sounding technical. There's a video where he explains that this vaccine doesn't stop in transmission or infection. He basically says clinical disease. He works so hard to come up with phrases that sound like, okay, I think, yeah, whatever you say, Fauci, like go for it. He's the guy that,
and his audience is being curated now. His audience is being curated. The people that ask him questions are curating it beforehand. It's so obvious.
Yeah, you probably know there's a couple of, like, there's a Latino comedian
that was great.
Hit him up with questions where he's like fumbling around. Like there's two instances where he basically lied to the guy about liability and about the aborted fetal cell lines that are in the Johnson
Straight up
vaccine.
lie. Straight up lie.
Well, that was the only option. Like, so, but there's no, the reality that if your listeners don't get this, the thing you need to know is that 50 to 70%, closer to 70% of all funding for mainstream media comes from the pharmaceutical industry. Their lobbying efforts in Washington are more than 2 to 1, the next closest one, which is oil and gas. When you understand that the media is controlled by the pharmaceutical interests that fund their advertising, and then you see a puppet put on stage that toes the line on mainstream media, it shouldn't surprise you. This is just like, duh. His job is to go spin whatever happens to be in favor of the people who are paying for the media.
Are you suggesting they don't have integrity, Christian? How dare you?
I know. I know it's shocking that there could be
that people could be influenced by money. Like that never happens. Right. Get out of here.
No, that's so no human is ever.
I hate sarcasm, but you just have to use it sometimes. Okay, so before we 14, I want to present 14 to to listeners a different way. If you think it's crazy to suggest that COVID-19 was made and released in a lab, if you think that's crazy, you got to screw your head on tighter, okay? And you got to open your eyes. I don't know for sure, 100%, whether that it was released from a lab in China, but I'm like 97% certain that it was, because that country is habitually lying about everything. Nobody even debates it. It's not even debated that Beijing lies about everything. They lie about their GDP numbers. They lie about their population growth. They lie about cotton from Uyghurs in Xinjiang. They lie about everyone and everything, and they steal and they cheat. These are not secrets, okay? This is known, and the Democratic Party and this is the one thing they agree on. The one thing that the Democrats and the Republicans agree on in the United States is that China is a thieving, lying nation. End of the story. That's nothing to say about your buddy Eddie Chung, who's a surf instructor in Maui. He's a good guy, and he's Chinese. We're not talking about Chinese people. We're talking about the Chinese government, okay, which is the government of Mao Zedong. They still have Mao on their money, okay, on the dollar, on their renminbi, okay. So if you don't think that there's a massive chance that the virus was came from a lab in China, you need to listen to Christian Elliot tell you a couple things in this section 14. Fauci is on the hot seat for illegal gain of function research, which is where they, just so to explain that first, gain of function research is, guess what, people? It is devised to make the virus more deadly and infectious. So when they're doing gain of function research, they're intentionally making the virus more infectious and deadly. And guess where they did that? At a lab in Wuhan, China. Guess who funded it? Christian?
Fauci did. Yeah. It's an ugly turn in history. And it was originally in the U.S. we were doing some of that research. North Carolina was doing. There was I think it's University of North Carolina. I could be wrong about that. There was a school in North Carolina that was doing this research, and I believe it was 2016, 14. The Obama administration banned the practice. Like that's unethical. We shouldn't be doing that. Well, bummer. All the money that was going to that research. And if you step back for a second and say, okay, why would we be like? What's the benefit to society to do this? Why would we do it? And if you want to make a bioweapon and you can take about the most contagious virus we know of, coronaviruses that are super contagious, easy to spread, but just not very deadly. But if you can make it deadly, then you have a weapon. You could start a pandemic. So to think that there's no chance, like if you know how many viruses are on the planet, the smallest estimate I could find was 100 million. The largest estimate I found was 10 to the 31st power.
Yeah, trillions.
Right?
Trillions.
More stars, more viruses on the planet than number of stars in the known universe, like millions of times more. And you're gonna take the posture that this is new. How in the world would you know that? We don't have names for a million viruses, let alone 10 to the 31st power. So the other option is that it was lab created, and it's very plausible. James Lyons Wilder at the Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge is one place they've been looking at this pretty aggressively. But the research that was banned in the United States, they didn't like that so much at NIAID. So Fauci decides to outsource that, and this is not debatable. That we have the paper.
It's not. This is not conspiracy. This is simple, known fact.
Yes, and so the only statement in this section I could have probably been more accurate with is that Fauci's on the hot seat. Well, his glutes probably aren't even warm. Like, he's not under pressure from.
He's killed that. Somehow they killed that.
He's managed to escape.
I mean, the fact that Mike Pompeo, what was that other guy that resigned, head of the CDC, that came out and said it's in like, he's a bald guy with the white hair on the side. And,
and he was on 60 Minutes.
Yes.
He went on and said,
this guy was the head of the
CDC.
Head of the CDC. He's like, it's made in the lab in China for sure. Mike Pompeo, who's Secretary of State, comes out and says, look, it's like, those guys are right-wing cranks. No, that's the Secretary of State of the United States. He has access to all the information, every security access you can have. The president has, the Secretary of State has. Okay, he knows everything.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting plot point that we have is that from where I sit, I would call it fake study that happened when they went into the Wuhan. The World Health Organization commissioned this. Where did this come from?
That was a staged study. Staged, not fake.
Only
theater.
The only U.S. representative was the guy who was funding that research here. Peter Dansk, I think is his name. It's shocking that was the best guy we could come up with. Like, do you think he's going to be looking for any sort of evidence that would make him look bad?
Yeah, possibly put him in jail for criminal negligence. Like, that's what would happen. I mean, come on, what a joke.
Yeah, so it's ugly and makes sense that we were trying to do that, and that's possibly explains what got released into the public. So,
number 15, I want to talk about India and Norway. Okay. All right. So the virus continues to mutate, right? First country to start mass vaccination program on a major population. So let's not use Israel. Okay. And the Pfizer vaccine, folks, seems to be the one that's the least problematic, actually. Okay, so I'm just going to say that. And again, I'm an anecdotal. I sell light bulbs. Spencer sells light bulbs. What the hell do we know? Okay, all right. But it just seems like that. So, but anyway, Norway introduces the AstraZeneca vaccine. Britain is already been vaccinated millions and millions of people at this point. Okay, first major highly populated nation to start vaccinating in the West, big time. Britain. Okay, they're all proud of it. The Economist magazine, the great rag of Britain. Their worldwide magazine. I read it a lot every week. And Britain is a leader and all that sort of stuff, right? And all of a sudden, there's a British variant. Oh, that guy, Gert Vanden Bosch, predicted that, actually, that after you vaccinate, he was predicting that and said that that's exactly what would happen. Norway introduces the AstraZeneca vaccine. And somehow, magically, a British variant emerges in Norway. Couldn't have anything to do. No. It couldn't. There's no similarity there that you introduce this vaccine. Oh, who else? Where is the AstraZeneca vaccine also used? Oh, it's used in India. Oh, what's happening in India right now? It's like nobody's allowed to question that. Nobody's allowed to say that. Like you, how dare you suggest the virus mutates? Yeah, it mutates naturally, but it's also been coerced into mutation. Tell us a little bit about that. Christian.
Well, it's the idea that, and it kind of goes into what Gerrit Van den Bosch is saying, or I think technically his name's Geert Van den Bosch, so I've probably been saying that wrong. But the idea, yes, I don't have that sound, but the idea that he puts out there is that never before in the middle of an outbreak have we tried to vaccinate a population. Like there's a ramification for that, and to vaccinate somebody who's already had it, we're not going to make vaccine-induced immunity better or more robust or longer lasting than natural immunity. So to put this pressure on a virus, and the way he describes it, is forcing the virus to find ways to get around this particular vaccine that we've introduced. And not surprisingly, I think South Africa is another place where they've had a similar issue going on, where the vaccine or whether it's a vaccine or not.
I don't know if South Africa has been vaccinated or not. I don't know if they have a campaign there or not. So I'm not going to, I don't know for sure about that. But I know India has AstraZeneca and Norway did.
Yeah. But when and if hopefully Mr. Van den Bosch is not right, and there are plenty of people who disagree with him, but golly, the guy's resume is impressive. If you've seen his LinkedIn profile, he's not some slouch who hasn't studied this and has no informed
opinion. He's not anti-vax either.
No, he's been dedicated his life to making them.
Exactly.
And so for somebody with that resume to come out and say, we have got to stop this immediately, and we need to have worldwide debate on whether or not this is ethical. Like, from my perspective, he has so much more to lose than he has to gain. But in the video that I referenced, he says, I feel like I have a moral obligation to say something. So whether or not he's right, and I'm not going to die on the hill that Mr. Van den Bosch is right, but by golly, if half of what he says comes true, and we are creating more virulent strains, or potentially doing that, we are creating vaccine-resistant strains, just like we've created antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Why in the world would we not pump the brakes and get the brightest minds in virology and vaccinology to come together and publicly hammer it out so we can watch and have awareness of what's actually going on? It's shocking to me that we don't do that, or that he has been vilified as much as he has. And
it's absolutely shocking. He should be on
open. Your point about the sunk cost.
Yeah, sunk cost effect.
The sunk cost. If he's right, then we've just screwed the entire world, and so he can't be right. We've got to silence him too. We've got to defame him. We've got to tell everyone why he's an idiot.
Okay, so during the cascade effect. Okay, so this is a known. Okay, like you could compare COVID to being in a cult. Okay, so the rapture is going to happen. Okay, Christian, the rapture is going to happen on May the 21st, 2023. And God is going to take Christ is going to return, and he's going to take all of his followers in a magical beam me up Scotty moment. And he's going to leave the rest of humanity to deal with the book of Revelation. Oh, really? Yeah, I really believe that. Okay. So then we start to see cult members looking for confirmation bias. All of a sudden, every scripture in the Bible supports this. And then they have multiple speakers come in and tell about the rapture, right? So then you create a group bias. Everybody in that group, in that church, has to believe this, and they all believe it. David Koresh, Jim Jones, whatever you want. This happens to humans, okay? Right? After the moment of the group bias takes hold, you have the cascade effect. Have you ever met someone in a cult? Have you ever met anyone in a cult? I have had the interesting pleasure to speak to cult members, okay, as a podcaster. And what I found, okay, is that the cascade effect, where everything they talk about has to be about the rapture and the implications, and we're the chosen, predestined people, and they're not. Everything in their life is about that cult. The sunk cost, so the cascade effect hits in your whole life. Everything's about COVID now. School's about COVID. The grocery store's about COVID. Movie theaters are closed. COVID. All we talk about is COVID all day. We're part of the cascade effect. Yeah. But when you get to the sunk cost effect is when there's leakage. Okay? So you're only in the sunk cost effect when there's known leakage. There's just facts coming out that you cannot dispute. You missed the date. Sorry, I got it wrong. It's not May 21st, 2023 that the rapture is happening. It's 2024. I misread the sand or the golden book or whatever the hell it is, right? And so now you're in the sunk cost effect. So you have leakage. People are saying, well, hang on a second. I thought you said it was May 21st. It didn't happen. What happened? I'm still here. right? I got the vaccine. I still have to wear the mask. I thought we were going to be raptured into the world of no masks, right? Sunk cost effect is when there's leakage. And there's a lot of leakage right now. And so what they're going to do is they're going to try to dovetail this into the status quo bias. And the status quo bias is the scariest of all, because there's no rationale anymore. They're not even giving you reasons. Only reason we're wearing masks now and social distancing and isolating and all this sort of stuff is because we've done that for so long. We might as well keep doing it, because otherwise everyone's going to look bad. And then maybe we're going to go to jail or something like that. And so the status quo bias is the scariest. Right now, Ontario is coming out of the cascade effect and into the sunk cost effect. So there's my little speech. I'm taking all the time here, but the virus continues to mutate, Christian. And now there's censorship in 16 is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And so in that sunk cost effect, you start to see censorship. There's too much leakage. We have to block the truth. We got to focus on India. Focus on India. All the news is about India. My kids are talking about India. 11-year-old, Dad, it's really bad in India right now. What are you talking? What do you know about India? Do you know how many people live there? A lot of people live in India. So how did we get to this place where the land of the free and the home of the brave is engaging in outright censorship of its population?
And I have some general ideas and some more specific ones. So there was again, the conspiracy theorists who like to point this out, or that like to say, oh, you're just making it up. Like, if you look at the history of what Bill Gates has done and the man's obsession with monopolistic control, and then you look at who he's funded, one of them being Adam Schiff, a senator out of California, he met with the heads of big tech and said, taking Bill Gates' advice and going and saying, we have to censor anybody who puts out quote unquote vaccine misinformation, which is basically just a way of saying anything that disagrees with what we want them to believe about vaccines. So that push began to happen. And then in my perspective, and there's other ways I can understand this, but as big tech got pressure from our government, which is illegal, it got pressure from our government to begin censoring dissent or debate about the products called vaccines, then as soon as big tech folded to that pressure, they're in the group they're now part of the problem. They have to continue down that path to continue to justify what they did, because they believe they're doing humanity a favor. And at the end of the day, now they're so far into it that to peel back and stop doing that is going to be really hard, because they have so much egg on their face. But the short version is that those who have power or want more of it and want to control our lives with vaccine passports, or tell us where we can go and what we can do, and for whatever reason we can't divorce ourselves from our phone, so they know everything about us. And to have that kind of data where they can know what we're doing all the time and can control us, or they can send us a ticket if we go to the beach when we're not supposed to because our phone was there. If you have that kind of control and people start to not like it, and you can take it down because this effort to help your control of this censoring of opinions that disagree with yours is the way to get there. That's one of the last things that has to happen for democracy to evaporate. When that starts to happen, you know that they know they can't win a debate. The facts crush them. And so rather than let them come to light, it's easier to just do our best. To me, that shows how desperate they are, because as far as I can tell, the traffic is only one way right now. People are not waking up and going back, you know what? I'm just going to go trust Moderna. I'm going to trust Johnson & Johnson. You know what? I know logic is telling me that this is not a good idea, but I'm just going to go do it anyway. Nobody goes that way. The traffic is only one way. The only way they can slow it down, which I don't think they're going to stop it, but you can slow it down by just continuing to not let people who have truth speak it.
Coercion.
And yeah, it is. And it's pressure. And the dog and pony show of the social media titans going in front of Congress and being subpoenaed, the reason there's no consequence to that is because there's enough people in power that protect them. As soon as that shifts, you're going to see a different landscape where there's social media sites or platforms popping up because the good guys aren't just sitting on our hands being like, okay, well, I guess it's a bummer. We'll just have to wait for them to take over the world. No, we're rebuilding a better model, and we're going to have freedom of speech as a centerpiece. and hopefully rational, kind dialogue as part of that. And it's going to take a while for that old way to die off. But to me, that's the beginning of the end of their reign. They've already sealed it. And now it's just a matter of time that those of us who are awakened can wake up as many people as possible. It's our job to do the best we can in this environment. So find other ways to get the word out, like what you guys are doing.
The reign of terror. It's interesting how I read a letter from, gosh, what's his name? Alejandro, I think his name is. He's the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and they had a very obtuse letter about domestic violent extremism. And to me, I'm wondering if that profile of that includes people that are against being vaccinated. I'm just wondering to myself, does that profile include that? Because you hear the debates in Parliament in Canada, a politician who's not an anti-vaxxer, who supported the COVID-19 measures for many months in the beginning, started to question them in about August, got kicked out of his party, and now he's an independent. Okay, there's a couple of them. And he questioned Patty Hadju, and he said, how come there's no encouragement for exercise, healthy living, vitamin D supplementation, and these types of things? And literally, the Minister of Health of Canada, okay, not Canada's a country, dude, like a major country in the world. We have the 6th largest economy in the world. We have all manner of science in institutions, and it's a wonderful place. Comes out and says, everybody knows that vitamin D deficiency is a problem with COVID-19. That's not a secret, okay? She basically tells him to stop watching fake news. This guy's not a crank, okay? He's the honorable Derek Sloan, representative of Hastings County in Kingston. He's asking you a question in the Parliament about why your government has not done more for prevention and treatments. And one of the things he brings up is vitamin D, exercise, weight loss. And you tell him to stop watching fake news? What the hell is going on here? That is not the answer to that question. Gets away with it. The press doesn't even question her on it. That's unbelievable to me. How do we get to this place? It's crazy. It really is crazy.
Well, we live in a world where he who has the money makes the rules. And the people with the most money who have their view of what the world would look like when it's functioning at its best, or just how they could shape the world to their sick vision of it, to go the conspiracy route of it. They have the ability to buy the votes, to determine what gets on the news and what news can be censored and what cannot be. And if we are left in a situation where he who has the money makes the rules, we end up with an oligarchy where the billionaires and Klaus Schwab and his buddies can just tell us, this is the vision for the future, get in line, don't think. And the sooner we wake up and people in your public health department and ours can just speak up. And I can't tell you how many doctors and nurses have reached out to me since I wrote that and said, thank you for saying what I can't say.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing a service to humanity, because we know what's happening, but we're stuck in a system and we're afraid for our jobs. And it's the professionals who are not, they were in private practice, they own their own business, who are the ones that are slowly becoming more and more emboldened to step up and do something. So when somebody in your own government does it, that's mad respect. And that guy, to your point, needs to be supported and not thrown under the bus. But he is, because those who have money can continue to make sure that those types of questions don't get asked.
I already had COVID, number 18. You did too. My brother, fellow survivor, we made it.
Yes, I can't believe we overcame that.
Oh my God, I was sick for a day and a half. My fellow, the survivor COVID beam. Oh God, I thought I was going to vomit when that came out. Thankfully, that's kind of died down. I don't know if you saw that back in April, hashtag COVID survivor. And it's like, I had to take 2 Advil and I felt, oh God. Oh my God. So you've given us an hour and a half of your time, Christian, and I think, Spenser, do you have any final thoughts or from your end?
I guess my one question is just, how do you get out of it? How do we get more people to at least critically think about it? And that's I think my biggest struggle is when you're dealing with all the people with the vaccine. I'm watching people that I consider pretty damn smart just go along to get along, and maybe that's just who we are now.
Yeah, there's not an easy answer to that one. I'm going to continue writing, and I'm going to take on some of those types of questions because we don't win this without waking up one person who wakes up another who continues to just do it in a way, your style versus my style versus anybody else's. Like, find the way that you communicate, sharpen it, go to work. I think part of why that article did as well as it did is just I've studied marketing and human nature for a long time. I know how to, on some level, talk in a rational, level-headed way where it's like, I'm not here to fight with you. I just want to have a discussion. This is what makes sense to me. And the more we can arm ourselves with good information that we can stand on solidly and be like, I just want to have this on the record so I can be on the right side of history here, and go into that not with bravado, but with humility and say, look, I don't know everything. I guarantee you, I don't understand every nuance of every situation. And to my COVID story in particular, yes, it was kind of a non-event. But it was not for my dad. And I'm going to tell that story in a blog post soon. But the idea that I can't talk about my story because it's dismissive to say it was no big deal. Well, you're dismissive of my experience now. So we got to have a standard of talking about it that just says, can we come to the table and agree to be friends when this discussion is over? And I don't know of a better way than human to human and getting out thoughtful, welcoming questions wherever they're not going to be censored. That's the best thing I can say that's part of how we end this. And unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of mass health problems and hopefully not mass casualties, but it may be that before more people wake up. And I think the line they cross with trying the vaccine passport has accelerated waking people up. Like, wait a minute, I want to get a smoothie, but I have to go give up personal medical information in order to buy one. There's some point where it's like, what do you have to see happen before you'll say, okay, that crossed a line. Like, that was a bit too much. And being able to gently, empathetically point that out to people is the only way I know to keep going. So that's my current best shot at that one.
Can I take a shot at that one, Spenser?
Go for it.
Okay, I think Christian's right to point out to human nature. Okay, and so a lot of smart humans believe in ghosts in the 21st century. Okay, so they believe, like a lot of people, that have very high intelligence. Okay, the problem is not with the horsepower. Okay, so a lot of people that are of high intelligence or that you think are smart or whatever, they may have a lot of horsepower in their brain in that they can remember things very well. They can regurgitate stuff on tests. They're conscientious. They can do their jobs. But most people, and I don't think the three people in this call are like this, but what you're talking about, Spenser, is not intelligence. You're talking about intellect. Okay? And so there's a major difference between intellect and intelligence. So somebody of low intelligence but high intellect is into like chemtrails and wacky or flat earth. So if you have a very high intellect, it means you're interested in ideas that go against the grain, or you're interested in seeking the truth. Someone of high intelligence and high intellect can't possibly buy into COVID-19, a COVID-19 narrative. They can't do it. It's not possible for them. But high intellect is much rarer than high intelligence. And so the other thing is that 60% of the population, Christian, is legitimately afraid of COVID-19. Like, if you look at the numbers, like on Bill Maher's sketch is beautiful. It's so beautiful because it illustrates, yes, there's a difference between Republican fear of COVID-19 and Democratic fear of COVID-19. But the one similarity they both have is that a lot of people believe COVID-19 is a lot more severe than it actually is. Right? And like you said, Christian, when people are afraid, they can be controlled very, very easily. And so how do you address the fear? I don't know, man. It's so tough when people are locked in. Like this is why we're headed to the status quo bias, because there's some people that will never recover. We have a society-wide PTSD event with COVID-19, similar to the Second World War, whatever you want, Vietnam. It's a PTSD event that everybody's impacted by. And so what Christian, I think, is advocating for, and what I'm advocating for, is polite, respectful dialogue, and insist on that. After that, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And folks, if you made it to the end, I think I speak on behalf of Christian and Spenser and myself. His article was on deconstructingconventional.com. I can post it on the website. We'll get Scott, the producer, to put it up on the website, so it's linked to it there. And then, I closed your website, Christian. What is it? Your personal, your business website?
Yeah, our business website is truewholehuman.com. I just put a blog on a different site because the site I was using didn't have a blog feature when I started. So those are the two places you can find me on the internet, truewholehuman.com and deconstructingconventional.com.
And all the social medias, I assume, too, Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, they're linked at the bottom. Interestingly, they're becoming less and less relevant. They don't want to hear some of the stuff I have to say. And so, but yeah, the social media links are down there at the bottom. And if you need some help with your health and you like critical thinking and high level analysis of not just your health, but of the habits that you've been stuck in, of the context of your life, and then the upstream elements of human nature that are relevant to why you can't make yourself do some of the things you know you want to do, that's the work we do. So,
and just to comment on that, you're also, I read your bio in the beginning, but you're also a certified nutrition coach as well. And so,
yes, sir.
Listen, health is not just about working out or eating right or thinking right. Those things need to be brought together under one strategy. I like to call it showing up for yourself every day. I'm sure Christian has a term for it. A lot of us are not showing up for ourselves, and then we're afraid and we're buying into all sorts of nonsense. But you know what? More importantly, if you made it this far, you probably really like podcasts. And you know what? So many of you podcast listeners out there, I know you're thinking, gosh, man, I could do a podcast on something or other or whatever. And if you got a bit of scratch and you just want to worry about the content and the guests, that's all you want to worry about. Because believe me, we were calculating it today with our producer out here. He produces a ton of podcasts for me. It's 6 to 8 hours of work to crank it out with the social media and all the other stuff that we do here at Get a Grip Studios. 6 to 8 hours of work. And if you're and he is a 30-year veteran of audio video technician, how long is it going to take you? That's why most podcasts only have 1 or 2 episodes. Go to any podcast website, you see they have 1 or 2 episodes. You know why? Because it's a lot of work. And if you like to do podcasts and you're good at it, you're probably not good at that technical side. That's the hard part. There's people that are good at that. Get a Grip Studios is one of them. Find them. Use them if you're serious. And then commit to 10 episodes. That's our minimum here. We're not going to sign you up unless you're going to do 10 episodes. So go to getagripstudios.com. Love you guys. Bye for now.